The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange glow over the quiet human colony on the edge of space. Major Alex Carter stood at the edge of a small field, his boots sinking slightly into the soft grass. He had just completed his latest mission, a successful raid on a rogue alien warlord. It had been one of many. His hands, still rough from the last battle, rested by his sides as he looked out over the peaceful scene before him. The birds were chirping, the wind rustling the trees, and the people in the distance went about their daily lives. A rare moment of calm. Alex had seen it all. He'd fought on distant planets, faced unimaginable enemies, and survived countless battles. He had become a veteran of the war against the alien forces that threatened Earth. He was proud of his skills, his experience, and the reputation he had built among his peers. He had seen wars that destroyed entire cities, battles where the ground was soaked in blood, and technology that could vaporize armies in seconds. But all of it, all the horrors and victories, had never quite prepared him for this feeling. The quiet. He smiled, shaking his head. I should enjoy it, he thought. Maybe this is what peace feels like. But the feeling didn't last long. His wrist communicator beeped, breaking the silence. Alex sighed and glanced down, knowing that peace was fleeting for a soldier. The message on the screen was from command. He could already sense the urgency in the brief, crisp words. It was a call to duty. He read the message twice. A new mission, a new threat. An ancient alien empire, unknown to Earth, had been discovered in a distant corner of the galaxy. They had sent out a message, an invitation for war. The ancient warlords are preparing for a galaxy-wide conflict. Immediate deployment required. You and your team are needed for reconnaissance and initial defense. Alex shook his head in disbelief. He'd spent years fighting one battle after another, but the thought of an ancient empire, one that Earth had never encountered, sounded like a bad dream. He had always known that war was never predictable. But this was something else. Something new, something bigger. His mind raced. How bad could it really be? He wondered. I've seen worse, haven't I? He had always believed that nothing could be worse than the wars he had already fought. No new alien enemy could outmatch the horrors he had witnessed. But a part of him, deep down, knew better. Every new war brought its own surprises, its own dangers. He had thought he knew war. He had been wrong before. And this time, he had a sinking feeling in his gut that this was going to be the one that changed everything. He quickly packed his gear, the weight of his rifle comforting in his hands. As he boarded the ship that would take him to the front lines, the realization hit him. He didn't know war. Not yet. And whatever came next, it was going to be unlike anything he had faced before. The journey to the military base took several hours, and Alex spent most of that time staring out of the ship's window. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The stars, usually a comforting sight, seemed distant and cold. His mind kept returning to the message he had received earlier. An ancient alien empire preparing for war. He had seen enemies of all kinds, but the idea of facing something that had been hidden for centuries sent a chill down his spine. The ship finally landed with a soft thud on the tarmac of the base. The air was thick with tension, and Alex could feel it in his bones. Soldiers moved quickly across the landing strip, all with a sense of purpose. He stepped off the ship and into the controlled chaos of the base. His boots clanged against the steel floor as he walked, his helmet tucked under one arm. Inside, the briefing room was stark, the walls lined with maps and data screens. At the front, Colonel Darnell stood, a no-nonsense officer who didn't waste words. He nodded toward Alex as he entered, signaling him to take a seat. The others in the room were already gathered, soldiers, officers, and specialists from different species, humans, alien allies, and mercenaries who had been handpicked for this mission. Everyone's eyes were focused on the screen in front of them, which displayed a hologram of a planet. The name was unfamiliar to Alex, Zorathar Prime. This is where it all begins. Colonel Darnell's voice rang out, cutting through the silence. Zorathar Prime, the heart of the ancient empire we've been tracking. Our first task is to investigate the enemy's movements and gather intelligence. But don't fool yourselves. This won't be just another recon mission. We're preparing for a full-scale assault. Alex raised an eyebrow. A recon mission, sure. But he had a feeling it wouldn't stay that way for long. His experience told him that things rarely went as planned in the heat of battle. Darnell clicked a button, and the hologram shifted, revealing an image of the enemy, a massive, towering species that looked like something from a nightmare. Their skin was an unnatural shade of gray, their eyes glowing with an eerie intensity. They were armed with weapons unlike anything Alex had seen before, massive, pulse-powered cannons and shields that defied the laws of physics. The image alone sent a shiver through him. They call themselves the Zorathans, Darnell continued. They're not like anything we've encountered. Ancient, brutal, and determined. We've intercepted communications indicating that they are preparing to expand their empire, starting with the colonies along the outer rim. Alex studied the image of the Zorathans, a part of him still unable to fully comprehend what he was seeing. These creatures had been hiding for centuries. He couldn't believe it. Everything he knew about war had been turned upside down. A voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Rila, a sharp-eyed alien with a sleek, reptilian appearance. "We have the advantage of surprise," she said. "They don't expect us to be this close. But once we hit their planet, everything changes." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the weight of the situation. This wasn't just another mission. This was the beginning of a war unlike any they had seen before. Alex's pulse quickened. His mind raced with questions. What could they possibly face on Zorathar Prime? Would they survive it? And what would the Zorathans want from them? As Darnell closed the briefing, the uncertainty hung in the air. Alex had thought he knew what war was. But now, as he looked around at the diverse team of soldiers and specialists, he realized how little he truly understood. He was about to find out. The dropship shuddered as it cut through the atmosphere of Zorathar Prime. The sky outside was a dark, ominous gray, and thick clouds swirled like they were alive. Alex's pulse quickened as the ship descended toward the planet's surface. The unease he had been feeling since the briefing had only grown stronger. He had faced battlefields of fire, endless enemies, and harsh environments. But this felt different. There was something unnatural about Zorathar Prime. Inside the cramped shuttle, the rest of the team sat in tense silence. Lieutenant Rila, the alien with her reptilian eyes, checked her weapons for the third time. Beside her, a hulking human soldier named Marcus adjusted his armor with the practiced ease of someone who had been in too many fights to count. The rest of the team, a mix of species and backgrounds, were ready for whatever came next, but the air was thick with the shared uncertainty of what lay ahead. "Stay sharp," Alex muttered under his breath. His voice, though quiet, carried the weight of experience. It was a reminder that, no matter how many battles you fought, you could never be too prepared. The ship jolted as it landed. A loud clang echoed through the cabin as the hatch opened, and the team was immediately hit by the cold, damp air of the planet's surface. Alex stepped out first, his boots sinking into the soft, muddy ground. The air was thick with the scent of decay, something ancient, something forgotten. The landscape around them was bleak, jagged rocks and twisted trees, all leaning at unnatural angles, as though the planet itself was caught in the midst of a struggle. "This place feels wrong," Rella said quietly, her voice betraying a rare moment of vulnerability. Her eyes scanned the horizon, ever watchful. Alex nodded, his instincts on high alert. It wasn't just the planet's appearance that unsettled him. It was the quiet. No animals, no sounds of civilization. Just the howling wind and the distant rumble of storms. It was as if the planet itself was waiting for something. "What are we looking for?" Marcus asked, his voice low but steady. "Intel," Darnell's voice crackled through their comms. "Get into the ancient city ruins. Gather whatever you can. We need to know what the Zorathans are planning." The team moved out, staying low and careful. As they trekked deeper into the alien landscape, Alex's thoughts raced. Ancient ruins. That was something he hadn't expected. He had assumed they'd be going into a modern military stronghold or hidden base, not a place that seemed to have been abandoned for centuries. Hours passed as they pushed forward, the ruins growing closer. They found strange carvings etched into the walls of the massive stone structures. Alien symbols, their meaning unclear, but their presence undeniable. The air was thick with the weight of history, and Alex could almost feel the ancient power that still lingered here. But the deeper they went, the more the sense of unease grew. There was something else, something alive, hidden within these ruins. Alex could feel it in his gut, something that wasn't just ancient, but waiting. Suddenly, there was a noise, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to come from deep within the planet. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the trees around them shook as if alive. "Get ready," Alex said, drawing his weapon. The team formed a tight circle, watching every direction. Whatever was waiting for them, it was getting closer. The ground trembled again, more violently this time. Alex's heart raced as the rumbling sound grew louder, echoing through the twisted trees and crumbling stone structures around them. Someone was coming. It was impossible to pinpoint exactly where, but the team could feel the pressure, the tension building in the air. "Stay alert," Alex commanded, his voice low but firm. His fingers tightened around his rifle. The team moved silently, crouching low, blending with the ruins around them. Each step was cautious, each breath held, as if any sound might draw attention. Rilla's sharp eyes flicked toward a shadow that moved between the ruins. "There. Did you see that?" Alex nodded. He didn't need to ask. Everyone had seen it. A figure, tall, cloaked in darkness, moving with unnatural speed between the pillars of stone. The Zorathans, or something else. He couldn't be sure, but his instincts told him they were no longer alone. They were being watched. The team advanced, staying in tight formation. The ruins loomed ahead, ancient walls covered in mysterious symbols, some glowing faintly in the dim light. The further they went, the more Alex felt like they were stepping into something far bigger than they had prepared for. This wasn't just about a war. This was a place of secrets. Then, as if on cue, the ground shook once more, stronger this time, and a terrifying roar echoed from deep within the ruins. The roar was unlike anything Alex had ever heard before, a guttural sound that seemed to vibrate through his very bones. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. This wasn't a creature he was prepared to face. What the hell was that? Marcus muttered, his hand on the handle of his weapon, eyes wide. Before Alex could respond, a shape shot out of the darkness. Fast, silent, and deadly. It was massive, far larger than any of the creatures they had encountered in the past. The creature's glowing eyes pierced the shadows, and its claws, each the length of a human arm, slashed through the air with terrifying precision. "Get down," Alex shouted. The team ducked just as the creature lunged at them, narrowly missing Rilla, who rolled to the side to avoid the strike. Alex opened fire, his shots piercing the creature's thick hide. But it barely flinched. The thing was huge, far more dangerous than anything Alex had fought before. "Fall back! Fall back!" Alex yelled. They had to regroup. This wasn't a fight they could win in their current position. The creature snarled and gave chase, its feet pounding the earth with each step. The team sprinted toward the entrance to the ancient city, desperate to put some distance between themselves and the monster. But the ground was uneven, the ruins a maze of sharp turns and sudden drops. They couldn't keep running forever. Rilla fired a series of quick shots, striking the creature in the chest. But again, it showed no sign of slowing down. The creature was relentless, faster than anything Alex had ever seen. The team was starting to tire, their hearts racing, their breaths coming in quick gasps. They had to find a way out, and fast. The team reached the entrance to a large chamber, and Alex slammed the door shut behind them just as the creature pounded against it. There was a moment of silence before the sound of claws scraping against metal filled the room. Alex's chest heaved as he leaned against the door, his mind racing. They had survived. Barely. But the worst was yet to come. If this was just the beginning of what Zorathar Prime had to offer, they were in deep trouble. The chamber was silent, save for the sound of heavy breathing. Alex leaned against the wall, his chest rising and falling as he listened for any sign of movement outside. The creature was still on the other side of the door, scratching and growling with increasing frustration, but it hadn't made any further attempts to break through. "We need to move," Alex whispered, his voice tense. "We can't stay here much longer." Rila, who had been crouching near the far corner of the room, nodded and stood up. "Agreed. But we don't know where that thing went. It could be waiting for us out there." Alex glanced around the chamber. The stone walls were covered with strange markings, some of which seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. But it wasn't the markings that had him concerned. It was the uneasy feeling gnawing at him. Something was wrong. He could sense it in his gut. He turned to look at his team, his eyes narrowing. Marcus was checking his weapons, looking distracted. The rest of the soldiers seemed just as on edge, but it was the way Marcus was acting that caught Alex's attention. He was too calm, too collected, almost as if the chaos around them didn't bother him. "You all right?" Alex asked, his voice sharp. Marcus looked up, startled, but quickly recovered. "Yeah, just making sure I'm ready for whatever comes next." Alex didn't buy it. There was something off about the way Marcus had said it, something too rehearsed. The veteran soldier had been through enough battles to know when something felt wrong, and right now, his instincts were screaming at him. He had fought alongside Marcus for years, and this wasn't the first time he'd noticed odd behavior. "I'm not buying it," Alex said quietly. "What's going on?" Marcus hesitated for a moment before his eyes flicked toward the rest of the team. His lips curled into a thin smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice too casual for the situation. Before Alex could respond, a loud crash echoed from the door, followed by a growl. The creature was still outside, pounding relentlessly against the thick metal, but Alex wasn't focused on it anymore. His attention was on Marcus. Suddenly, Marcus reached into his pack, pulling out a small, sleek device that Alex immediately recognized. It was a communication jammer, one that could block all signals from their squad. It was a tool designed for covert operations, but it had no place here, in the middle of a life-or-death situation. "You're the traitor," Alex said, his voice low with anger. "You've been working with the Zorathans." Marcus didn't even flinch. Instead, he slowly stood up, the grin on his face widening. "I'm not the traitor," he said, his voice cold. "I'm the one who's going to survive this, and I'll make sure you all do too. But first, I need you to understand. You're all expendable." Alex's hand instinctively reached for his weapon, but before he could react, Marcus slammed the jammer onto the ground, activating it. The lights flickered, and the comms went dead. They were alone, completely cut off from the rest of the team and from any support. Rilla stepped forward, her weapon drawn, but Marcus was faster. He swung a high-tech blade, catching her off guard. She dodged, but it was clear. Marcus had been planning this all along. He wasn't just part of the team. He was a sleeper agent, a Zorathan sympathizer sent to sabotage them from the inside. The betrayal hit like a punch to the gut. Alex couldn't believe it. He had trusted Marcus, fought alongside him in countless battles, and now, the man he thought he knew had turned on them without hesitation. Marcus wasn't just a threat to their mission. He was a threat to their survival. "This is it, Alex," Marcus said, his voice full of cold satisfaction. "I'm not just saving myself. I'm making sure you never make it out of here alive." The air inside the chamber was thick with tension. The traitor, Marcus, stood across from Alex and Rila, his eyes glowing with a cold, merciless light. The sound of the creature outside continued to echo, but it was the threat in front of them that now dominated Alex's thoughts. Marcus was no longer the man they had fought beside. He was something else entirely, an enemy within their ranks. "You've made a big mistake," Alex said, his voice steady but full of quiet fury. "You're not going to get away with this." Marcus chuckled, the sound cold and empty. "You think you have the upper hand." Before Alex could respond, Marcus lunged. His blade flashed through the air, narrowly missing Rila. She reacted quickly, parrying with her own weapon. The two clashed, their movements fast and deadly. Alex watched the fight unfold in front of him, knowing they couldn't afford to waste time. They needed to stop Marcus before he could alert the Zorathans to their position, or worse, activate whatever plan he had set in motion. "Enough," Alex shouted, stepping forward and aiming his rifle at Marcus. Marcus froze, a wicked smile still on his lips. "You don't even know what you're up against, do you?" he sneered. "There's a reason I was placed here. And you." Suddenly, there was a loud crash from deeper within the ruins. The ground trembled once more, this time stronger than before. Alex's instincts kicked in. Something was coming. Something big. What the hell was that? Rilla shouted, pulling away from Marcus, her attention shifting to the noise. Alex's gaze shot to the far side of the chamber. The walls were shaking. Dust and small stones fell from the ceiling as the rumbling sound grew louder. Then a low hum filled the air, followed by a strange mechanical whirring. It wasn't the creature outside. It wasn't Marcus. It was something else entirely. "What is that?" Alex asked, stepping cautiously toward the source of the noise. "It's not just the Zorathans that have weapons," Marcus said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "You've walked right into a trap. That sound you're hearing, that's their secret weapon. It's a weapon that's been buried here for centuries, waiting for someone to awaken it. And you just did." The wall on the far side of the room shifted, revealing a massive metallic structure hidden deep within the ruins. It looked ancient, yet sleek, an enormous machine that seemed to pulse with power. Its surface was covered in strange markings, some of which Alex had seen earlier, etched into the stone. But now, they were glowing, as if coming to life. "That's impossible," Rilla whispered, her eyes wide. "It's like nothing we've ever seen before." "That's the Zorathans' true power," Marcus said, a wicked smile spreading across his face, "a weapon capable of destroying entire cities. And now, it's awake." Alex's heart sank as he realized the full extent of their situation. They weren't just fighting against an alien species. They were facing something far worse. An ancient weapon that could wipe out everything they had worked to protect. And Marcus, the traitor in their ranks, had been leading them right into it. "We have to stop it," Alex said, determination rising in his chest. "No matter what it takes." Before anyone could respond, the machine began to hum louder, its energy crackling through the air. It was charging up, preparing for something. "We don't have much time," Rilla said, gripping her weapon tighter. "We either destroy it, or we're all dead." The humming of the ancient weapon grew louder, sending a tremor through the floor of the chamber. The walls, cracked and weathered by time, seemed to vibrate with the power of the machine now fully activated. Alex's heart raced as he glanced at Rilla and Marcus. The traitor stood motionless, his smug grin never fading as the machine behind him began to glow. "We need to stop it now," Alex said, his voice steady despite the growing panic in his chest. "Whatever that thing is, it's charging up for something big. We don't have much time." Rilla nodded, her eyes scanning the room for a way to disable the machine. "It's not just the weapon we have to worry about," she said, her voice filled with urgency. The Zorathans will know we've triggered it. They'll be here any minute. Alex didn't need to be told twice. The Zorathans were a relentless force. If they knew they were so close to one of their most powerful weapons, they would come in full force. Time was running out. Without hesitation, Alex turned and sprinted toward the base of the machine, searching for any controls or switches that might give them a chance. His fingers brushed over the cold metal, feeling the faint pulse of energy beneath the surface. It was like the machine was alive, responding to his touch. But there was nothing obvious. No buttons, no levers, nothing to stop the destruction it was about to unleash. Behind him, Rilla was already on the move, checking the perimeter. "The traitor doesn't matter right now," she muttered under her breath as she prepared for the incoming assault. "We need to focus on the weapon." Marcus, however, hadn't moved. He stood still, his hands raised slightly, as if reveling in the chaos that was unfolding. "You're too late," he said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "The Zorathans will take back what's theirs. And when they do, your pathetic little team won't be able to stop them. You're nothing compared to what they've built." Alex clenched his fists. Marcus had been a trusted teammate, and now he was an enemy. The betrayal stung more than he cared to admit, but there was no time for emotions now. There was only one thing to do. "Rilla, cover me," Alex said, taking a deep breath as he moved closer to the machine. "I'm going to try to disable the core. If we can't stop this thing from firing, we're all dead." Rilla nodded without hesitation, taking a position behind a stone pillar and scanning the area for any signs of movement. She could sense it too. The Zorathans were coming, and they weren't going to show mercy. As Alex approached the machine's core, his hand trembled slightly. He didn't know if it would work. The technology was alien, ancient, and far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. But there was no other choice. With a steady hand, he reached out, pressing his palm against a glowing panel that seemed to respond to his touch. The machine pulsed again, brighter this time, and Alex's heart skipped a beat. Suddenly, the chamber door slammed open, and the unmistakable sound of heavy boots echoed through the ruins. Alex's eyes widened. The Zorathans had arrived. "Move. Now." Rilla yelled as she opened fire at the first Zorathan soldier to emerge. Bullets ricocheted off their thick, metallic armor, but Rilla's shots found their mark, causing the enemy to stagger. They were heavily armored and more powerful than any soldier Alex had ever faced. Alex didn't waste any time. His hand shot back to the machine, trying to push more buttons and switches, but it was clear the weapon had already started its countdown. The Zorathans weren't just coming for them. They were coming to reclaim the weapon, and they wouldn't stop until it was back in their hands. The team was under siege, caught between the machine's destructive power and the unstoppable enemy. Alex's mind raced. There had to be a way to stop it. There had to be. The Zorathans charged forward, their weapons crackling with energy as they closed the gap. The room filled with the sounds of gunfire, and Alex's heart pounded in his chest. They had to hold off the Zorathans long enough to stop the machine. But with every passing second, it became clearer. This fight was about to get a whole lot worse. The room was chaos. The machine behind Alex hummed louder, its energy crackling through the air like a living, breathing entity. Zorathan soldiers stormed into the chamber, their heavy boots pounding the floor with every step. The sound of gunfire filled the space, mixed with the sharp growls of the enemy. Alex barely had time to register it all before he was forced to act. "We can't hold them off forever." Rilla shouted over the noise, her weapon raised as she fired at a Zorathan soldier charging toward them. Her shots hit, but the enemy's armor absorbed most of the impact. The Zorathans were a relentless force, and this time they had the upper hand. Alex's mind raced. The machine, the weapon, they had to stop it. But the Zorathans were closing in fast. Each one of them seemed like a wall of steel, armed to the teeth, and it was clear that they weren't going to stop until they had their weapon back. "We have to destroy it," Alex said, his voice tight with urgency. Now, Rella's eyes met his, and she nodded. She knew as well as he did that they couldn't waste any more time. The team wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to prevent an unimaginable disaster. Alex darted toward the control panel of the ancient weapon, his fingers flying over the glowing buttons, trying to make sense of the alien technology. Sweat beaded on his forehead as his mind struggled to process the strange symbols and patterns. He had never seen anything like it before, nothing that made sense. But the countdown was ticking, each second pushing them closer to the end. Behind him, Rilla continued to cover him, taking out one Zorathan soldier after another. But they were outnumbered, and as more of them stormed into the chamber, Alex realized that even if they fought their way through, they might not survive long enough to stop the weapon. "I need more time." Alex gritted out, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the controls. The machine's energy field was growing stronger, the air crackling with power. He could feel the ground vibrate beneath him, as if the planet itself was reacting to the weapon's energy. It was almost too late. Suddenly, a voice behind him broke through the chaos. "You're wasting your time, human." It was Marcus, the traitor. He stood at the edge of the room, a smug grin plastered on his face as he watched Alex struggle with the controls. "You think you can stop it? You're too weak. The Zorathans are unstoppable. This war has already been won." Alex's anger flared. "Not if I can help it," he growled, turning back to the panel. But his hands were slick with sweat, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to find a way to deactivate the machine, or at least buy them more time. Just as the countdown reached the final seconds, Alex's fingers brushed over one last symbol. There was a soft click, and for a split second, the machine's humming faltered. "Got it," Alex shouted, relief flooding through him. The energy from the machine began to fade, the pulsing light dimming as the weapon powered down. But it wasn't over yet. The Zorathans weren't giving up. With a roar, they charged, their weapons raised, ready to finish what they had started. Alex knew they couldn't keep them back much longer. They needed to leave, and fast. "Fall back to the ship," Rilla shouted, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "We're not done yet. Let's get out of here while we still can." Alex nodded, his eyes meeting hers. They had survived this far. But the war was far from over. As they sprinted for the exit, the Zorathans closed in, their weapons firing. The air was thick with gunfire, and Alex could hear the sounds of the battle echoing behind him. But they didn't stop. They couldn't afford to. With one last burst of speed, Alex reached the shuttle, pulling Rilla and the others inside. The hatch slammed shut, and the engines roared to life, lifting them off the ground. As the shuttle ascended, Alex glanced back at the ruins of Zorathar Prime, the dark clouds swirling over the ancient city. They had stopped the weapon, but the Zorathans were still out there. The war wasn't over. And Alex knew, deep down. The shuttle soared through the atmosphere, its engines roaring as it escaped the planet's pull. Inside, Alex slumped into his seat, his body heavy with exhaustion. His mind was still racing, trying to process everything that had just happened. Zorathar Prime, an ancient world, an unstoppable weapon, and the betrayal of someone he thought he could trust. The mission should have been a simple reconnaissance, but it had turned into a fight for survival. Around him, the rest of the team sat in silence. Ryla was staring out the window, her expression unreadable, while Marcus, the traitor, was locked in a holding cell. He had been taken down during the retreat, his plan foiled when the team had fought their way out of the ruins. The fact that Marcus had betrayed them still gnawed at Alex. How could someone he had fought beside for so long turn on them so easily? "Are we safe now?" Ryla's voice broke the silence, her gaze still fixed outside the window. She was trying to find some comfort in the stars, but the unease in her voice was unmistakable. Alex sighed and leaned back in his seat, rubbing his temples. "We're safe for now. But this war, It's not over. The Zorathans will come after us. They won't stop until they get what they want. Rilla turned to him, her eyes sharp. We've only seen the beginning of what they're capable of. What's next, Alex? What do we do now? He didn't have an answer. The Zorathans were an ancient and powerful force, and they had barely scratched the surface of what they were capable of. The weapon on Zorathar Prime had been stopped, but there were more out there. More machines, more soldiers, and more secrets waiting to be uncovered. We need to regroup, Alex said after a long pause. Get back to Earth, report what we've learned, and prepare for the next strike. We know the Zorathans are coming, and we need to be ready for them. I don't think the weapon we stopped was the only one of its kind. We can't let our guard down. Rilla nodded, but her expression remained grim. And Marcus? Alex glanced at the holding cell where Marcus sat, his hands cuffed behind his back, his eyes empty. We'll deal with him later, Alex said, his voice hard. Right now, we have bigger problems to face. We can't waste time on him. The truth of it hit Alex like a cold wave. Marcus had been a part of their team. He had been a soldier, someone Alex trusted. But now he was a prisoner, a reminder of how fragile trust could be in war. The betrayal still stung, but Alex couldn't let it cloud his judgment. They had bigger things to worry about. The Zorathans were out there, and they were going to bring the fight to Earth. As the shuttle passed through the final layers of the atmosphere and began its descent toward Earth, Alex stared out the window. The familiar blue and green of his home planet looked so peaceful from here. But he knew better. War was coming, and this time, it wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a fight for the future of humanity. The shuttle landed with a soft thud on the military base's tarmac, the engines sputtering as they powered down. Alex stood up slowly, his muscles sore from the long flight. His mind was still spinning, haunted by the memories of Zorathar Prime, the ancient weapon, and the brutal fight they had barely escaped. As the hatch opened, a flood of cool air rushed inside, but it did little to clear the tension that clung to him. The team disembarked, their faces weary but determined. They had made it back alive, but Alex knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Earth had been spared for now, but the Zorathans had only just begun. The weapon they had shut down was just one part of a much larger threat, a force that would stop at nothing to take control of the galaxy. What now? Rilla asked, her voice steady, but the exhaustion in her eyes was impossible to miss. Alex didn't answer right away. He glanced around the base, where soldiers and technicians hurried back and forth, preparing for the next phase of the war. There were briefings to be done, reports to file, and strategies to discuss. But none of it mattered until they understood what the Zorathans truly wanted. We regroup, Alex said after a long pause, his tone firm. We report what we've learned, and we prepare. The Zorathans are coming, and they won't stop until they've wiped us out. This is just the beginning. His words were heavy with the weight of truth. They had survived the first wave, but there was no guarantee they'd survive the next one. The Zorathans were relentless, and they had only begun to scratch the surface of what their enemies were capable of. As the team made their way into the briefing room, Alex noticed a group of high-ranking officers waiting for them. The moment they stepped inside, all eyes were on them. The silence that followed felt thick with expectation. The team had brought back vital intelligence, but Alex knew they were all thinking the same thing. How much of it would even matter in the grand scheme of things? Major Carter, one of the officers, began, her voice clipped, professional. We've reviewed your report. The Zorathans, it seems, have more weapons like the one you encountered on Zorathar Prime. But we also know that they've been in contact with other alien factions, building alliances. This war, it's going to be bigger than we thought. Alex nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral. They were just beginning to understand the true scope of the threat. But in his gut, he could already feel the heavy burden of what was to come. What's the next step, sir? Rilla asked, her voice steady but firm. She had always been the one to ask the tough questions, and Alex admired her for it. The future of humanity rested on their shoulders, and they couldn't afford to make mistakes. The officer looked at the team, her eyes hard with the knowledge of what was at stake. We're going to need every soldier, every ally, and every weapon we have. We'll launch counterattacks where we can, gather intelligence, and fortify our defenses. But above all, we need to be prepared for what's coming. The Zorathans won't stop, and we have to find a way to make them. Alex stood tall, his resolve hardening. This was the reality of war, the one that came after victory, where there was no time to rest, no time to mourn. The fight wasn't over, and it would be up to him and his team to face whatever came next. As the meeting came to a close, Alex felt a wave of determination wash over him. He knew what they had done, what they had sacrificed, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. "We'll be ready," Alex said, his voice strong and unwavering. "We won't let them win. We've got one shot at this, and we'll take it."